Support for this program comes from Jazz on the Tube, the Internet's largest collection of free streamable classic jazz videos. From Miles Davis to Louis Armstrong, from Thelonious Monk to Duke Ellington. You'll find it all on jazzonthetube.com. Start your free subscription today.
Hi, and welcome to Jazz Talk, a Jazz on the Tube podcast. My name is Ken McCarthy, and this is where we talk with people who are doing important work that supports and illuminates the music we love. The writers, the scholars, the educators, the filmmakers, the producers, and more. Today we're going to be talking with a distinguished musical professor from the land down south of New Orleans. And I want to say something about New Orleans before we get started. To me, it's a big dividing line in the jazz world. There are people that have never been to New Orleans, and all they really know about New Orleans is Louis Armstrong, and that's where jazz began. And that's good. That's a start. Then there are people that have been there as tourists. They've maybe gone in for a couple of days and seen Bourbon Street and come home, and that's good. But it's a little bit like going to Times Square and thinking you know New York. There's a lot more to it. Then there are people that go to Jazz Fest and spend a week or more and go to all the performances, and that's good. But my experience with New Orleans, which is pretty limited, I've only maybe spent a year there total in my life throughout the course of my life, maybe more, maybe a year and a half, is that it's like a big onion, and you peel away one layer and you think you understand it, and then you realize, oh no, there's more to it, and then you peel away another layer, and there's more to it, and then you finally, at one point, it dawns on you, you're never ever going to get to the bottom of it. There's so much there. So today we're going to look at one piece through the eyes of one musician and his life and his career, and we're only going to be able to scratch the surface of his music. And that's just scratching the surface of New Orleans. So I give this introduction because I want to make sure that everybody that loves this music, as soon as this crazy thing that we're going through is over, get on a plane, go to New Orleans, and experience it firsthand. Go to all the clubs. Have the musical experience of your life. So with that as an introduction, welcome, Roger Lewis.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Everybody doing out there in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think we're all doing better than the newspaper tells us. But that's another story.
Another thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's so many things. I have long notes. But the first thing I want to say to everybody is, if you don't know the Dirty Dozen Brass Band, now you know the name. You should absolutely check it out. They have a website, dirtydozenbrassband.com. They have a Facebook page, of course, and maybe we'll start there to give people a sense of this organization, how important it is to world music, really. I think everybody knows there's a brass band tradition in New Orleans, and everybody probably at this point has heard some of the modern brass bands, but what we don't know is about that transition. How did it go from traditional to what we're hearing today, which is multifaceted and multidimensional? So, Roger, you and your friends at Dirty Dozen Brass Band played a big role in the transformation or the evolution or the development of the brass band. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on when you guys got together and said, let's do something different with the brass band configuration? What was going on in New Orleans at the time? Yes, thank you.
Well, at the time, we started. Most of the brass bands were playing traditional New Orleans music. It's like, hymns that they play in the church when they speed them up when they hit the streets, and some music like that, and the march music like Bugle Boy March, some of the marches and whatnot, South Rampart Street Parade March. But when we started, we was playing the music, traditional New Orleans music, but in a Dirty Dozen brass band, you have the opportunity to play whatever kind of music you want to play. And we wasn't trying to, we just were trying to play music that we wanted to play. So we started playing the music of Michael Jackson. We started playing the music of Duke Ellington and Charlie Parker and Jimmy Forrest and Horace Silver, Dizzy Gillespie, and we brought this Thelonious Monk, and we brought this music to the streets of New Orleans with a different beat, not trying to change New Orleans music, and playing a lot of fusion, and of course our own compositions, because we play a lot of original music also, and brought this music to the streets, like going down the street playing Blue Monk, and people was dancing off of that, and bongo beats, Caravan, Tippin', and we made up a song called My Feet Can't Fail Me Now. Matter of fact, that was our first CD on the George Wing collection on Concord Records. And in Feet Can't Fail Me Now, you have the music of Charlie Parker, and also at the very end, you have the music of Horace Silver, and other little things in between. So, and we slightly picked up the beat, because in New Orleans traditional music is like, it's not too fast and it's not too slow. It's like in between. You can, you can dance slow or you could dance, fast. But we picked the beat way. We picked the beat way up. So it actually created a dance, what they call now, it's called bug jumping. You have to. I always say when you come to, we used to do these 4-hour second line parades, and I would always say, when you come to a second line that the Dirty Dozen is playing, you better have your tennis shoes and your jogger suit. If you're overweight, you're going to have a good workout. You're going to lose a couple of pounds. So for 4 hours, that music going to be intense. And, playing all this, it kind of changed. We were kind of credited with changing the history of brass band music. And Craig Joseph, which is our sousaphone player, his style of playing kind of revolutionized that kind of music, brass band music. But there was a guy before Craig Joseph, and his name was Anthony Lacey, better known as Tuba Fats.
Okay.
That played with the Olympia Brass Band. Now, the Olympia Brass Band probably was the first band I heard, the great Olympia Brass Band, before Dirty Dozen. Howard Dejan, Olympia Brass Band. Those guys, they probably came with the funk, before, I'd say even before the Dirty Dozen. But the Dirty Dozen had the funk, and then they had it by interjecting all these contemporary sounds, avant-garde, and the music like of Charlie Parker, and interweaving this music within what we were doing. Caught the ear of a very famous producer by the name of George Wing. George Wing he was playing at a McDonald's school in the French Quarter, and he heard the band, and he invited us to record, I should say, on Concord on the George Wing collection, which we did. That was our first, well, it wasn't our first CD, but it was our first, I would say, I don't even want to say professional, but first international label, I would say, like that, Concord. And then we had a booking agent by the name of Charlie Graciano, and then between those two guys, they brought us and put us on all these jazz concerts all over the world. So we had a chance to play with a lot of famous, open up for a lot of famous jazz musicians, and then eventually start headlining our own show. So that's pretty much, how we got started. The band been together about over 40 some odd years. We started traveling in '83, I think, but we started putting this band together in 1976. Now, I don't want to leave out the guy who really started the band, and his name was Benny Jones. Benny Jones is a drummer. He also started the Dirty Dozen Brass Band. He started the Tremé Brass Band, which is Tremé Brass Band, and Chosen Few Brass Band. You know, Benny Jones was the guy who really started at that time it was called the original Six War Dirty Dozen Brass Band. Mm-hmm. You know, back in '76, when he started this band. You know, of course he's no longer a member because the band has changed different personnel over the years. When we first started, Benny Jones, Janelle Marshall. Then when Benny Jones left the band, it was Lionel Baptiste Jr. And of course, Craig Joseph, Charles Joseph, those two brothers, Gregory Davis, Kevin Harris, Ephraim Pierre Towns, and myself, Roger Lewis. You know, and it was a all acoustic band. But as years went by, you know, we added guitar. At one point, we had a full rhythm section. We had Richard Knox and Carl LeBlanc. You know, and then Jake Eckert and Jamie McClain and Kapori Woods, you know, and different drummers, Terrence Higgins. Then we converted into a set drummer, you know, Terrence Higgins and Janelle Watson and man, the list go on. I'm trying to remember all these people. Yeah, another guy. Carl Roussel, Fred Sanders, keyboard players. So the band changed. As the band is today, it's Julian Addison on drums. He's from Dayton, Ohio. And
so when people are out there all over the world and hearing all these interesting, exciting local brass bands, they should know that this, of course, it started in New Orleans, but it started with the Dirty Dozen, and of course you mentioned the Olympia Brass Band. Olympia's an old band, right? Haven't they been around since the beginning of time?
Oh, yeah, the Olympia, man. We had the Unward Brass Band. We had the Eureka Brass Band, some of the older brass bands. We had the Tornadoes, you know, brass band. I mean, these are older bands before Dirty Dozen. Now, a lot of people say the brass band thing was dying out. That's not true. Because they always had brass bands in New Orleans. The only thing that happened, the Dirty Dozen came along and changed everything. We not trying to. You see, people think it was a calculated plan, but it wasn't a calculated plan to do what we did. We just wanted to play the music that we wanted to play. I was studying music at Southern University under the direction of Edward K. Jordan, and that I had been playing, you know, I'm the oldest guy in the band. I've been playing music about 60 some odd years. I'm 79 years old. I'm the oldest guy in everybody's band pretty much, because I play with another group called the Uptown Delphio Marcellus Uptown Jazz Orchestra. I play in that. That's my big band gig that I do when I'm not doing Dirty Dozen. But I mean, I try. You know, I've been playing music a long time, so I brought a lot of history to the band, and so did the other guys, whatever music they wanted to play, or they had an original composition, just bring it to the band and work on it and get it played. We play it, you know, that's unselfishly, you know. So I think that made the difference with us, because we was experimenting with a lot of different music, different sounds, you know, avant-garde, everything. And
I think some people are maybe not aware that, you know, New Orleans is not a pharaoh's tomb. You know, in other words, it's alive. People are influenced. They're influenced by new things. They're listening. You know, when Charlie Parker was around, people in New Orleans were listening to Charlie Parker.
They had people in New Orleans, not to be cutting you off, but they had people in New Orleans was playing like Charlie Parker, like Son Johnson. He's no longer. I mean, he was back there. Charlie Parker was the only cat that was playing like that. There are people in New Orleans that was playing like that. I mean, like when I first went on the road on an international, I joined Fast Domino Band in 1971. Played with him until he played his last gig. Because I was in and out, Dirty Dozen, Fast Domino. That's not what Dirty Dozen was working on playing with Fast Domino. You know, it's a whole history playing with Fast Domino and Dave Bartholomew and the great Lee Allen and Herbert Hardesty, all those guys that like Herbert Hardesty was the guy that playing all the solos on Fast Domino records. He passed a few years ago. And the great Lee Allen, who was the saxophone player on mostly all R&B and rock and roll records. So he was a tenor player on Little Richard. And all these cats, Little Richard, he was a tenor saxophone player that played all them solos. You know, as a matter of fact, since we're talking about that, even back in the day, New Orleans was not only jazz, but New Orleans was a rhythm and blues town. Mm-hmm. You know. See, Fast Domino, he would tell you, he said, well, we don't call our music rock and roll. As far as I knew, we was playing rhythm and blues. You know, that rock and roll came from somewhere else, you know. But New Orleans was a rhythm and blues town. And at one time, New Orleans was like Motown. Everybody was coming to New Orleans to record, you know. So it was not only, New Orleans, sometimes people get it mixed up. New Orleans is just not a jazz town, you know. New Orleans is like a melting pot of different styles of music, man. You know, because we influenced by the French, the French, the Italians. You know, we got all different cultures here in New Orleans. You know. So it's like you got a little bit of everything in New Orleans music, you know.
I'm kind of curious. There was you did a show with John Cleary on his live stream, which was great, which inspired me to
Canada.
Yeah, John Cleary.
We were just getting warmed up. We had bad connection when we first started doing the interview. And then we took a little break, and then maybe the last 15 minutes of the interview, we started really getting into it, you know, because he wanted to know how New Orleans was during the time I was coming up, you know, as far as the music scene and places that was around, you know.
Yeah, that's what I felt, and I was like, I gotta follow that thread because there's some interesting stuff there. Let me ask you about something that came up in that call that'll lead us to talking about the New Orleans scene. You mentioned that there were guys that were in New Orleans playing like Charlie Parker. They weren't. I'm going to guess they weren't copying Charlie Parker. They discovered.
But they was playing that style, man. Yeah, you know, playing that style of music. Man, they had so many great saxophone players around here. They had a dude by the name of Nat Paralot. I think that's right. But when John Coltrane came to New Orleans, he was playing at a club called Vernon's Lounge on Louisiana Avenue uptown. So when his train got off the plane, he was looking for Nat Paralot. Nat Paralot was a great saxophonist. Matter of fact, he was in that lead with John Coltrane. You know, they had a guy around here by the name of Eddie Williams. He could play everything John Coltrane could play. Matter of fact,
really?
Oh man, he had so many great sax. You know, that's what I was saying earlier. When I joined Fast Domino Band in 1971, we went all over the world. You know, I went all over the world with him, and I got a chance to hear the best of the best. You know, and I said, now. They got dudes at home sound like this. You know, so I've been hearing this all my life. There was a guy by the name of Alvin Red Tyler. Now, Alvin Red Tyler was a saxophonist. He actually was a famous guy because he was a studio musician, and he was one of the guys that was on all of these early rhythm and blues records, including Little Richard, because when cats came, he was a studio musician. Even Cosmo Potassis, his studio where Little Richard recorded. But he was the first guy I heard play jazz live. He was playing, when I heard he was playing tenor. But I was hanging out with a guy by the name of Frederick Kemp, who was that guy there. He was a great saxophonist. And, you know, a lot of people that you don't hear about don't make it to the forefront. Is that a good word to say? But you know, you got musicians, man, that you probably never heard of, man. You know, New Orleans has so many musicians that could play, and New Orleans was a drummer's heaven, man. You see what the difference with New Orleans music is the beat. It's that beat, you know. And the other thing is that people because people steady flocking to New Orleans to find out how to play New Orleans music, but what they don't realize, this music is very spiritual. You know, because a lot of musicians come out to church, and they have the gospel in their music. They have the gospel in the music. A lot of like today, a lot of guys play fast and play a lot of notes, but those, you know, the notes don't, all that, you know, no disrespect to education and music, period, but if it don't feel like, if you can't feel it, it don't make sense. Music is a feeling, man. You know, man, it's how you make people feel, man.
You know, which raises the issue of the church and the importance of church in New Orleans, and how many New Orleans musicians really got their education, their foundation in church, either hearing it as small children.
Well, like, there's a ballroom on the corner and there's a church on the corner, but like coming up, usually most people come up in the church. You know, you go to Sunday school, you get up in the morning on Sunday, you go to Sunday school, Sunday school during the week. You go to prayer service, then you know, New Orleans is very spiritual. Well, it used to be, you know, back in my generation, you know, to make you go to church. And a lot of people come up playing in the church. You know, like this was a guy by the name of Danny Barker that created Fairview Baptist, a band. And that band was originated in Fairview Baptist. So a lot of those guys came out, like guys like Leroy Jones and Greg Stafford and all these different cats come out to church. So what I'm saying is the gospel is in the music of New Orleans. People try to figure out what it is. It's the gospel, man. It's this, you know, that's the difference, you know. It ain't about all in playing all in thousands of notes. It's how the music feel. That's why they come and try to figure it out. That's what made Louis Armstrong so great also. And Sidney Bechet. And Mahalia Jackson. I mean, you know what I mean? It's a lot of elements in New Orleans music to make New Orleans music what it is. That's why people flock in here to find out what's happening. You know, and then that's why when you go other places and play this music, you're so well accepted all over the world. And, you know, it's just, you know, we got a lot of great musicians, you know, like you got Wynton Marsalis, Bradford Marsalis, Nicholas Payton, Terrence Blanchard, and all these cats, you know. It's like a revolution, not revolution, I don't want to say that, but just look like when they left New Orleans, they just excelled, man, and, you know, to higher levels. Because this city's something else, I'm telling you. You can make a living more playing music.
That's why I always encourage people that love music, if they have never been, they really need to go. It's another world. There's a quote somewhere. It's even on video. I'm going to see if I can find it, where Louis Armstrong is saying, it's the ladies in church that drove the music. You know, that they'd get to rocking, and that he considered that the basis of the music. That's pretty deep. So in your era, when you were growing up, the church was a lot more solid. More people were involved in it. It really held the communities together. Maybe more than today.
The church, then you had what they call benevolent society groups. The benevolent society groups was clubs, whereas if you didn't have money to bury your loved one or money to take care of your family, you know, or disgusting, so you needed a little help, they would come to your aid. You know, then later on they merged into what we call social and pleasure clubs.
And each one of these groups has its music's at the heart of it. If they're going to do an event, they're going to have a live band. It's going to be a brass band.
Oh yeah.
You know, they're all going to have their annual parade. They're all going to have, or their second line, they're all going to have their annual ball to raise money for the parade. It's unusual in America. It's such a live musical city. You can't do anything significant in New Orleans without having a live band involved.
Oh man, you could have I seen, you know, like rhythm and blues bands playing, like, see if they might have an event where they have a rhythm and blues band playing, right? Then they hire a brass band to come in at the last part of the gig, and the brass band come in and turn everything out. And people, it's just the energy and the feeling and of what it is totally different, you know. You know, it's just like when the Dirty Dozen, we used to open up for people, and a lot of people didn't want to play after us because of that. We would turn the place out, you know. You know, because I remember we were somewhere, I think it was in Germany, and we did about 5 or 6 encores, and I think Buddy Rich Big Band was coming on after us. We did about 5 or 6. People would not let us leave, man. It was like unreal. I mean, the impact of the music and the feeling of the music, it's just totally different, man. It's just a different thing. Like my wife name is Marie Watson. I mean, she came from Japan, Tokyo, Japan, to come here and learn New Orleans traditional jazz. She probably know more about New Orleans traditional jazz than most people that lives here. I mean, she studied all the styles of Sweet Emma, who played at Preservation Hall, and the style of James and Booker. You know, she can play like these people, you know, because she studied that. You know, I'm just saying that's the impact that the music of this city has on people. You know, even back in the day when Motown took a lot of people out of New Orleans and brought up to Motown, like Smokey Johnson, Earl King, and all these R&B cats, a whole group of cats that was happening at the time back in, I think that was back in the late 50s, early 60s, somewhere around up in them. There's a lot of Smokey Johnson up in the room. Just let him play grooves. And, you know, New Orleans drummers, most sought after drummers, you got people like Herlin Riley, who, you know, was probably one of the most sought after jazz musicians. Well, I ain't gonna call him a G for everything musician. Then you had the great Earl Palmer that had drums in everybody's studio in Hollywood that recorded with everybody. So now you name it. You know,
and people may not know those names, but they know they've heard the music, but with frontliners, somebody has the big name. But the guy playing the drums, you may not know who it was.
The cast from New Orleans, like even in Ray Charles' band, he had a guy he's from New Orleans. He loved New Orleans drums, but he hung out in New Orleans a while. You know, back in the day, you know, he had a guy by the name of Hogan. You know, he had Tanu, guy by the name of Tanu, Charles Otis, better known as Honey Boy. I mean, the list go on and on. I'm talking about some Junie Boy, Clarence Johnson, John Boudreaux, cats like that, man. These cats was great New Orleans drummers, man. David Lee, who played with, I think he played with Sonny Rollins, you know, at one time, you know. I mean, it was like a drummer's paradise.
I looked at numbers, and I don't think New Orleans ever has had more than 1 million people total living in it. And when you look at the impact that relatively small place had on the music of the world, it's outsized. It's like they say a boxer punching above his weight. It's almost crazy. The only other place I can think is comparable is Cuba, but Cuba's got 11 million people. So they have 10 times as many people. But I don't know any other place on earth that has produced more master musicians in the last 100 years. I don't think there's one that comes even close.
It's a musical town, man. It's a musical, spiritual town, man. There's no place on the planet like this city, man.
You mentioned Ray Charles, and there's something I'd like to talk about. Is there are a lot of great, famous musicians that had a big influence on them by visiting or living in New Orleans that people just aren't aware of. One of them is Ray Charles. Another one that nobody ever talks about is Lester Young, and he spent part of his childhood in New Orleans chasing after the bands and listening to all the music. That had to have an influence. And then the other one I really would love to talk about. We have a whole section on Ornette because he was a friend of mine, and I'm always...
Ornette Coleman.
Yeah. Now, people don't realize that, and I have some stuff from Ornette I'll share it with you in the audience too. But Ornette came to New Orleans, I think, when he was 19, and he stayed with the Lasty family.
Guess what? I lived in the 1900 block of Delaware. The Lasties lived in the 1800 block of Delaware Street. And I used to hear, when I was a kid, I used to hear those guys. The house they lived in was like what we call a Camelback house.
Uh-huh.
You know what a Camelback is? It's like
it's got a little front and a big back.
It's got like a Camelback. It's like got a upstairs, but it's like a flat house with an upstairs in the back. That's we call it Camelback. Anyway, them cats used to be back up. I used to hear them playing, practicing back then. I was a little kid. I was kind of shy. I should have knocked on the door. But Ornette Coleman and the Lasties, David Lasty, Melvin Lasty, Walter Lasty, Charles Otis, all them cats would be back there practicing, man, because he spent a lot of time with the Lasties back then. I didn't get a chance to meet him.
My understanding was that the Lasties were like a refuge for musicians. If you wanted to, Ornette, they took care of Ornette for I think he lived there for months.
He lived with them. He lived with them people, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great family. It was a musical family. Their grandfather, I think he's credited with introducing the drums to the church. Frank Lasty. Mm-hmm. His grandson is Hurlin Riley.
Really?
His grandson. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Oh my goodness.
Now, a lot of people don't know, but Hurlin Riley was a trumpet player. He always played the drums. But at 12 years old, he played his first gig with me at Lawless, I think it's Lawless Elementary School. His uncle came by my house and picked me up and said, man, come on now, we're doing something for the kids. Let's go down there. Play a couple of numbers. So I'm on stage playing with Hurlin. Hurlin comes up on stage, a little kid with a trumpet. And man, this guy was playing like a pro. I was
really.
I said, how you can play like that? I'm trying to play them notes. And his uncles, they was laughing at me because they didn't know I didn't know what was happening. But his other uncle, Melvin Lasty, they taught him how to play the trumpet. But he was a hell of a little trumpet player, man. He was, but he did pursue it. I mean, he didn't pursue it. I think he had some kind of stuff with his chops. I don't know. But then when I seen him again, he was playing with Ahmad Jabal. He was playing drums. I was wondering how that happened. But he told me, he said, man, I always did play the drums. Now, so the story go, when they're like sitting at the dinner table, because his grandfather was a drummer, Frank Lasky, they would be playing rhythms, with the knives and the forks and stuff, That's how that, from my understanding, how that particular came by. So I'm just saying, a lot of people get started like that. In New Orleans, it's just about everybody and everybody's family plays some kind of musical instrument or has played some kind of musical instrument. That's why it's such a musical city. Like
and Frank Last, my understanding is Frank Lasty kind of inherited the spiritual tradition, and I can't remember the lady's name. There was a really powerful spiritualist minister lady, and that when she passed on the power to him, and everybody was kind of surprised because he was a drummer. They didn't understand why she did that. But
yeah, well, he had a church, down in the Ninth Ward. He had a church. He had his own church.
Now, when I was talking with Ornette about life in the Lower Nine, he was kind of older at that time, and he didn't remember too many details. But one thing he said, and maybe you could help us because you were there. I only know the Lower Nine after Katrina, right? So I don't know anything. Yeah, so he told me the Lower Nine was like the countryside. There was trees and gardens and.
Oh yeah. Well,
tell us about what it looked like, what life was like in the Lower Nine.
I'm gonna tell you because I was raised uptown in what we call the Garden District. Mm-hmm. It's like I was raised on camp between Pleasant and Harmony. How about that? Okay. Then my parents moved to the Irish Channel, where all the Irish people lived at, which is on the other side. The dividing line is Magazine Street, the street they call Magazine Street. So on the other side of Magazine Street is what we call the Irish Channel. And I lived on 7th in Chapatoulas. Now, Chapatoulas is the last street in the city, going that way. Then my dad bought a little piece of property down in the Lower Ninth Ward on Delaware Street, which is, it's not the last. There's a little short street that runs about 2 or 3 blocks, which is behind Delaware Street, but it's just very short. But the Delaware Street is the last street before you get into St. Bernard Parish. We dare say it's the last street in the city, from one extreme to the other. Now, when we moved down in the Ninth Ward, they didn't have paved streets. Might have one paved street, St. Maurice, but everything else was, like a lot. It was like country. Make a long story short. They had what we call gutters. It's like a ditch. You know what a ditch is? A gutter?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And then they didn't have, everybody had what they called septic tanks in the yard because they didn't have, sewage and all that kind of stuff back then. So that was a country, man. People had chickens, horses, all kind of stuff. And a lot of greens. It was the country. The Lower Ninth Ward was country, man.
That's what Ornette said. He said there were a lot of leaves.
Yeah, and I tell you what, standard shoe apparel was, you better have you some galoshes because when it rained, I remember when I was a kid, we used to have planks. We put planks and leading up to the house from the street because you didn't have paved sidewalks or none of that stuff. Man, it was a country, and they only had. They had 2 buses. We got me going back to my childhood. There was on St. Claude Street, St. Claude Refinery bus. That would go all the way down to Domino's Sugar. That was the refinery bus. Then they had one that would stop at Delaware Street, So there was only 2 buses. And they had, now you have to walk. Now, bear in mind, that's the only 2 buses that was coming down in the Lower Ninth Ward. But that was like on the outskirts of the Lower Ninth Ward, trying to describe this to you.
Yeah.
So if you was in the inner, like the inner part, like where I was living, like that's like about 10 blocks. You had to walk 10 blocks to catch the bus. I just think about, like, if you was on Law Street or one of them streets, which is like maybe about 15 blocks, or all them little streets in that Lower Ninth Ward, that's the only bus that's coming down there. And that bus only runs till about 11 o'clock, I think it was, 11 or 12 o'clock. So if you miss the bus coming down there, then you got to walk. And they didn't have no street lights and whatnot, so it was dark down there. All that, it was like the country, They had one little bus in Cleveland.
The Lower Nine's a big area.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You know,
Yeah,
then later on, they start running the Galvez bus down there through there, then the Barracks bus. You know, that came way late in the game. The Ninth Ward had its own thing as far as music. You had the Lasters, and you had a lot of, you know, George Davis, you had Eddie Bowie, of course you had Fast Domino, Ernest McLean, a lot of by the name of Prevost. And New Orleans had his own one-eyed move, better known as Morris Bashman, cats like that. They had a lot of clubs that you could play in the Lower Ninth Ward. They had neither what we call them joints or ballrooms, you know, where cats be playing. They had jam sessions. They had a club called Freddie Domino where man, it'd be dog back up there, like around Law Street, doing the lights, you go in cats. You come to a little joint, like in the woods, off the Forbidden Path, where they be having jam sessions, serious jam sessions. Gotta be back there. Chuck Beatty and them cats be back there playing, man. You know, I mean, see, there were so many places where people were playing jazz and blues. It's like you were saying, you know, you go to Bourbon Street, you think that's it. You know, but when you start venturing out into the city, different parts of the city where they tell you don't go, that's where all the good music at.
That's right. I mean? That's right.
Where all the good music at. Because back in the day, I'm gonna speed up a little bit, and then I'm gonna go back. Back in the day, we was playing a club called Darrell's. That's where in the 7th Ward, where the Indians used to hold their Indian practice. You know, New Orleans Indians would hold their practice. And that was even before a club called a Glass House, which was famous. Glass House became a very famous club. It was like somebody's garage, that storage room. They turned it into a club. You put about 25 people in there. In fact, we put about 50 or 75 in that place. And that club that was famous, man, it was in the neighborhood. And you ain't supposed to be going there. People getting robbed and everything else was happening to them. But they were steady coming because that's what, you know. But I remember one. No, that was in the Uptown. That was Uptown. What call it? That was Uptown. Darrell's was in the 7th Ward. That's the first club we used to play at on the weekend. I think it was on the weekend. The Glass House we used to play during the week. But the Glass House became really famous because a lot of musicians used to come through there. Like one night, I remember Fast Domino was sitting at the bar. Bernard Purdy and Dizzy Gillespie was sitting in the table in the front. And Manhattan Transfer was in the back of the room.
Wow.
And I mean, when people when they used to come, musicians come to New Orleans, they would always flock that, come to the Glass House, man. That's where the Dirty Dozen was playing. But we used to be rocking that place. I mean, then the music created a dance style, or buck jumping. That real fancy footwork that kids be doing now, you know.
So that's where that started? That started with the Dirty Dozen brass band music? Buck dancing?
That particular style. It wasn't buck jumping like that because the music wasn't that fast.
Ah, okay.
You know, the only thing about what's happening now with brass bands is that they're not really, they're still playing that New Orleans feeling and the young kids doing what they're doing, but like they're not really playing a lot of traditional New Orleans music. I think there's only one brass band around that I heard that's really carrying on the real of the tradition. Other than the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and that's the Hot Heat Brass Band. Those guys really embrace them. Yeah, I just did a CD with those guys. I think it was last year. That's carrying on the tradition of pretty much what we were doing. But none of those bands, they don't play the music of Bird or Charlie Parker like what we were doing. They don't. That takes a lot of sit down, and some of them don't want to sit down and pay them kind of dues, man. You coming on the big playing dexterity tipping, and we used to play all like Sidewinder. We used to do Night in Chinese. Matter of fact, a guy that we did a show with Dizzy Gillespie, and actually Dizzy Gillespie recorded with us on I think it was Voodoo and Bradford Marcellus, and but we did a thing I think it was at the Orpheum Theater back in the 80s, and I didn't know they had a recording of that. They're getting ready to put it out too.
Oh, really?
This set me in with the Dirty Dozen. I think about 4 or 5 songs he played on, and it's beautiful.
Nice.
Things. They're getting rid of Galactic.
What's the label?
I don't
know the label.
Galactic is getting ready to put it out.
Okay.
Yeah, the group out in New Orleans called Galactic, they're getting ready to put it out. The group that bought Chipotina's, Uptown Chipotina's anyway. But getting back to the Ninth Ward, so the Ninth Ward had its own thing. Okay, Uptown had its own thing.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you just a second on that? So how old were you roughly when your family moved to the Ninth Ward, Lower 9?
Let's see. Started playing music at 8 years old. I was living uptown. It was 1948. Okay. Got a saxophone in 1950. I guess I was about 15 or 16 maybe.
Oh, okay. So so a lot of your musical development took place in the Irish Channel or uptown or in Garden Street.
Yeah, I started playing piano. Piano was the first instrument. Then I got a saxophone when I was living in Irish Channel, actually, at 1950. Then we moved, played in a high school band, so that's 50, 51. I said probably around 58, 57, around 58, we moved down to the Lower Ninth Ward, I think.
And what kind of music were you hearing as a kid? Obviously, the church music. Were you hearing club music at night? Maybe coming through the window.
Yeah, we didn't have television, so we had radio. You stick your ear to the radio.
Oh, okay.
I was hearing a lot of. I'm gonna tell you, as a kid, I was hearing a lot of country and western music.
Really?
Yeah. I used to, oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam and a deer and antelope play. Well, seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the sky is not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range where the deer and the antelope play. Well, seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the sky is not cloudy all day. Oh, yeah, man, I love that song.
People don't realize how much country and western music flows around. It's everywhere.
Then you had that, because Zydeco, you had all that kind of music. All that stuff was happening too,
Oh, really? That was already happening when you were a boy.
Man, that music did. A lot of people don't even know about that part of the history of down in Lafayette and all that. Man.
Hear that on the radio?
Well, not so much of that. You just hear that as you coming up, But then a lot of classical music. Matter of fact, I used to listen to a lot of classical music coming up because that would be an opera. A lot of that music would be on the radio, And,
there's stories about Louis Armstrong going to the opera house and just standing outside as a little boy just to listen.
Oh yeah, well a lot of that, that was a part of my culture coming up, because we had that kind of stuff in the school system,
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Actually, there's such an important person who should always get mentioned when we talk about New Orleans music, which is Yvonne Bush.
Oh yeah, that was one of my teachers.
Let's talk about her because talk about not getting talk about musicians not being known. Here's a teacher of so many musicians that people just don't know about.
She played in a band. She was a trombonist, but she could play all the instruments, But she was really a trombonist, and she played with a group called Sweethearts Sweethearts of Rhythm, all lady band,
Mm-hmm.
and she taught just about everybody that's anybody in music in New Orleans. She was my teacher in senior high school at George Washington Culver, and I was playing as a professional when I was in junior. Well, in high school, I really turned pro. I was playing with a group called Deacon John and the Irish. It was #1 band in the city at the time. That's a whole other story. But anyway, I come to school one Monday morning. I just had got off a gig. So I come to school, we were playing Washington Post March. And I come in there, I've been hanging out with all the older guys, because, I never hung out with guys my own age pretty much, because I was out there in the street playing in the ballrooms, as a teenager. I mean, ballrooms like 13, 14 years old. I'm playing clubs, and dives and all kinds of places, man. I come to school that Monday, and we was playing Washington Post March. Playing Washington Post March. So, by me being out and, playing with all these older musicians, jazz musicians, rhythm and blues musicians, and I was saying, when I came, I said, I wonder how it would sound if we play it like this. So Ms. Bush came in the room, and she came in the classroom. We were swinging. She said, "Son, get out of my classroom."
Oh, really?
Bad. Yeah, she told me I was a bad influence. But I can understand that now because, she's trying to teach kids how to play, to read the music. We ain't nobody trying to teach nobody how to improvise, take the music to a different, because those teachers, when they're teaching out of a book. They have they're trying to mold you into. I was already there because I was kind of like an advanced far as, there was only maybe a few guys in the band that was playing outside of high school. A guy by the name of maybe Ronald Lewis and Ernie Ellick and Calvin Howard. Probably was only about three and David Lee that was playing professional music. Kids, and the rest of them was just little kids,
So how did you get your chops? How'd you get your chops that young to already be playing professionally?
It just happened, man. I wanted to play so bad. See, I was a tenor player. I started playing tenor because I was influenced I had a cousin. His name was Alvin Bailey. That's really who got me started with the saxophone. It was alto. I didn't really play the alto. At 10 years old, my daddy bought me a tenor. But I always was fascinated by the sound of the tenor saxophone because the tenor saxophone was the music saxophone that you was hearing on all these records on rhythm and blues. My background was mostly in rhythm and blues, honking and that kind of thing, Matter of fact, I used to play with a cat. I didn't know he was famous at the time. His name was Big Joe Turner. All I know, he was a big fat dude with eyes popping out of his head, talking you want to be a mighty man, want to roll like a big wheel in the Georgia cotton field, honey hush. Then some years after that, man, I was looking at, I think it was the Basie band. I'm not sure. He was the Basie band, or it had to be the Basie. He was a special guest. So he come on, he started singing, I want to roll like a big wheel in Georgia County. Shake, rattle, and roll. That was the name of the song. And I started singing. I said, man, I remember that guy there when I was a little kid. We used to do gigs with him because he used to live in New Orleans, And I knew everything he played was mostly in C. I said, I'll be a C night tonight. I could play in C pretty good, C concerts, Yeah, man. It's interesting.
Can you talk about some of those gigs that you played when you were younger? Like, what were the places like? The audiences? How big they were?
Well, it was like if you were playing at a club called a Dewdrop, you had arrived. That was like the place to play. That's like the Royal Peacock in Atlanta, Georgia, or the Apollo in
oh, wow.
New York City. That
level.
That's what the Dewdrop was like. You know, it was a nightclub, and it had a diner in the back. You can go get your plate of red beans or some meatballs or spaghetti for about, I think, 35 cents would get you over. You know, and they had like a little strip. They had another little club right there next door. Then down the street, they had a jazz club called, I think it was called Foster's. The cats would play jazz, you know. It was uptown New Orleans. So he was playing. As a matter of fact, Ray Charles used to. It was a nightclub, a diner, and attached to it. It was a hotel to it too. It was a complete thing right there. Because a lot of bands would come to town. They would stay at the Dewdrop. Well, they couldn't stay anywhere else because we was dealing with segregation at that time. So that was the scene, man. You know, that was the scene. The Dewdrop.
The Dewdrop has another interesting history. Like you mentioned, segregation, and the clubs were segregated.
But Dewdrop wasn't segregated.
Well, he fought it. He's the man that fought it, and didn't there were a lot of raids and a lot of arrests and a lot of hassles.
Oh yeah.
But he kept persisting.
Yeah, like all the white musicians, like a guy by the name of Mac Raminack, better known as Dr. Jones, who really came up in the black community playing music. They really embraced him. Matter of fact, his guitar teacher was a guy by the name of Roy Montrell, which was one of the guitar players with the Fast Domino band, other than a guy by the name of Papoose. But that was Roy. He taught Dr. Jones how to play the guitar. That was his guitar teacher. So,
okay.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's so much history.
I know.
We'll be talking from now until 2030. I mean, let me jump around so you can get a little bit of taste, a little bit of how it was. So, Uptown had its own thing, the Dewdrop. Then now you go out in Kenner, Louisiana, which is about 10 miles outside of New Orleans. You go to Kenner, out there right where the airport is, New Orleans International Armstrong Airport. It's Armstrong Airport. That's Kenner, Louisiana. They had a club out there, a nightclub called Hutchinson Inn. That was run by a tenor player, Larry Hutchinson. That was another scene. Then down a little roads, you had little clubs like Bells, and that was the name of a club called Bells. It was run by Lee. Then if you go out in another part of which before you get to Kenner, you got Metairie, Louisiana, which is a hop, skip, and jump. Because, we got parishes here, and so you go to Metairie, then you had, what was the name of that club? The Chandelier, Glorious Chandelier, where they had music all out there, man, And then you had the Lower Ninth Ward. So it was actually in just about every neighborhood there was some live music, other than what they had on Bourbon Street. Now, Bourbon Street had some real good music during my time because you had the famous door. You had cats like Thomas Jefferson. Man, he's and then you had Preservation Hall. Then you had what was the name of that hall that was famous? I can't think of. Oh man, I can't think of the name of that hall. He's the 544 Club. Then you had Frogman Henry, where he used to play at a club down there. Bourbon Street was popping. You had good music down on Bourbon Street, man. There was a club called, what's the name of this club? I got it on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of the name of it. Showball. Showball.
My understanding was that two things happened. One, and you could confirm this. I don't know. I'm just reading it from a book that the district attorney at the time, like in the '60s, early '60s, started shutting down a lot of clubs. Is that true? Did that really cause as big a problem as?
I don't really know about that because, I don't remember that. I mean, maybe it did happen because I left New Orleans Well, I left New Orleans back in I started traveling in '71, but during my time, I don't remember no clubs being closed down. We had a lot of places to play. Matter of fact, there was a guy by the name of Mason. He created a strip called Mason's Las Vegas Strip.
Really?
And that was matter of fact, it was a hotel. It was had a jazz club in there. You had a disco club. Then you had a rhythm and blues club, all in this one complex. And you had a restaurant.
What neighborhood was that in? Really?
Uptown New Orleans, like, if you're familiar with the city.
Yeah.
Like around Claiborne and Jackson Avenue, around up in that area.
Interesting.
Now, matter of fact, the building is still, it's a hotel now. But, it's called Mason's Las Vegas Strip. That was a whole nother scene, man.
That must have been fun.
They used to have, when John Coltrane came to New Orleans, that's where he stayed.
Really?
He stayed at Mason.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where he stayed at.
It's called Mason's Las Vegas Strip.
Yeah. Well, it's called just Mason's now, because Mason died and they kept the name, The building, the hotel, it's there. It's a hotel now. The clubs are not there. They just closed all that stuff and they made more rooms,
Oh, I see.
Yeah, man. That was a whole they had all kinds of different scenes in New Orleans. Many places to play.
Now, what about this that I heard? I don't know if this is true, that everybody was doing really well with rhythm and blues, and then the Beatles and all that came, and that took a lot of the wind out of commercially out of some of the
what would happen. The Beatles, maybe. I think the biggest thing was disco.
Oh, okay.
Disco, and then people they start doing, like in Chicago. They used to spend a lot, used to have DJs. New Orleans never didn't have a whole lot of didn't have DJs. They had live music. Then the disco thing came, and that that affected the music a lot too. The disco area. But New Orleans still had music. There's still places to play. New Orleans had never not had live music. Even now, we got live music,
Oh, yeah.
I've been doing gigs. Matter of fact, I got a gig this evening. I'm playing in front of a ballroom. God paying us to play, not Dirty Dozen, but some guys that I play with, James Andrews, doing a little gig in front of a bar. And they put out the tip box and you make a couple of $100, doing that.
Well, that's a good question. And, someday historians might be listening to this this interview, and we're doing this interview on November 21st. So hopefully we're at the tail end. Hopefully we're at the tail end of the pandemonium. But I don't know. I hope it is. So what's it been like in New Orleans? I have to think it's been difficult.
Oh man, it's been devastating, man. You got musicians, man. If that's all you do is play music, then you need a little help to maintain. Some musicians are more fortunate than others because they got other things, going on. But the music community is really suffering. Pretty much.
What kind of groups? Are there any groups that you think are particularly good down in New Orleans that are helping with the situation the musicians are facing that you can recommend?
I would say Preservation Hall, or the Jazz. Peter Lowe and the Jazz Foundation doing a very, very, very good job.
It's called the Jazz Foundation.
Yes, a guy by the name of Peter Lowe I think they're out of New York. They're doing a lot of.
Yeah, they also help musicians with medical bills. Is that the same group?
Medical bills.
Jazz Foundation of America.
Yeah, man. Groups like that. You got Preservation Hall and Delphia Marcellus, Uptown Jazz Orchestra. He's helping musicians also. He's helping guys out, whatnot, put money in their pockets. And I just did a live streaming for Penn State through the Delphia Marcellus Uptown Jazz Orchestra last night. It should be aired, so, you got cats that's in better shape than other cats that's lending a hand in what we're dealing with, And then what made it so bad now that the mayor, she don't want, you can have live music, but you can't have no wind instruments, which I think is ridiculous.
Oh my goodness!
You gotta, you can't play indoors. You can't even play out. Yes, we're supposed to play outdoors. Because they say you blowing, and you blowing. Oh damn! People sitting down talking. I mean, what the heck? They got people sitting outside eating.
People are breathing too.
Yeah, people walking around with no mask on, man. They should be. If that's the case, if you want to enforce something, why don't you enforce everybody with mandatory to wear a goddamn mask like y'all do? Like it's mandatory to have a seatbelt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's crazy. Because I did a thing for NCIS. I think that's the name of that New Orleans yesterday. With a Zydeco band, we was playing outside, but we was pantomiming because I couldn't blow. They started playing, because they got electrical instruments, but I couldn't blow. I just had to pantomime behind the music that we had already recorded the day before. And this was outside.
And what are the audiences like? Like I'm trying to visualize this. So it's in front of a club.
The thing we was doing was outside in Washington Park around was that street, Frenchman Street, right off of Elysian Fields. If you're familiar with the city up, in that area, the Marigny, called the Marigny. They had people like 6, 8, 7 feet, but this all was staged because this is a TV program, So it was all staged, Like I do when I do these street parties. People come sit out in their lawn chairs, and they be social distance. Some of them be, some of them don't. You know how that is.
So there's still street parties with live music.
Oh yeah, they never start having no music. New Orleans had music during Katrina. People did playing music. The music don't stop.
Well, they've stopped it in a lot of parts of the country, but it's good to know that they haven't.
Last week I played at a guy's house, man. Played his pool party, man. He had catered food and whatnot. People were jumping in the pool and man.
Good.
New Orleans is something else, man. Yeah. Man, do a gig. They call it the cakewalk. This cat, he cook a lot of food, did some cakes. He had the band playing in front of his house, New Orleans is New Orleans, man. This is the way it is around here,
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Yeah. Speaking of Katrina, I believe because I was there right after, and then for every winter I'd go there for a couple of months at a time, and I really believe it was the musicians that brought that city back.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something, man. People come to New Orleans basically for two things: the food and the music. Pretty much.
Yep.
And it's the Big Easy. You can move as fast as you want. It's a relax. This city is like really relaxed. Conventions. It's just a relax. It's just a relaxed environment, It's only that 1% they give it a kind of a bad name, But most of the people in New Orleans are hardworking people. It's a family-oriented
very much.
City,
very much.
And everybody just about know everybody. Everybody damn near kin to everybody around here. You go to talk and you find out, oh, that's your cousin, And then you don't know. The other thing is, you don't know if you're talking to somebody black or white. You really don't. You don't really know.
Yeah.
You don't. I got people in my family white as a sheep, so you don't really know who the hell you talking to in New Orleans. And if you go to Lafayette, you really get your head, you get twisted. Some people, them Creole people, I'm just going to say, you see, That's what makes New Orleans. New Orleans is a melting pot of different cultures and different kinds of class of people, and New Orleans always was different, man. Even during segregation, this city was really not really segregated, because of that. You got the Creoles, you got the Ponson Blanc, and then you got the Native Black. Then you got Indians, which is a lot of people don't know. Like a lot of the Native Americans are actually black folks that mix, with I mean, it's like I said, it's a melting pot of different cultures, man. Because we embrace the Native Americans because a lot of us are Native Americans.
Yeah,
that's right.
I did a little study of not just New Orleans, but how many great named jazz musicians like Charlie Parker, like Ornette, like Disney. They all have a little bit of native blood, all of them, every one of them.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah, Sidney Bechet, Mahalia Jackson, all these famous people that came out the city, and excelled, If the music of New Orleans wasn't powerful, they wouldn't have named a doggone airport out for Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong probably the most famous trumpet player in the world.
That's right. That's right.
I'm just saying. They all came from.
One thing you said, I think it's really important for people to really grasp if they don't know the city. People hear about Mardi Gras, and then they see on TV people on Bourbon Street, just playing fools. But what they don't realize is the truth is the carnival season is a very family-oriented thing.
Yes. I mean, you got all kind of parade. They got a parade out in Metairie, Louisiana, which is a hop, skip, and jump from New Orleans, Metairie.
Yeah.
You got a parade that you can go out there and get a meal. I mean, they be throwing away cabbages and fruits and vegetables.
I like how people
come home buy 10 cabbages with some carrots, some onions, some garlic. They be throwing away. That's the kind of throws they have. They be throwing out.
That's the Irish. That's the. I think that's the St. Patrick's Day. They do that. They do the cabbage. I remember I went to that.
Cabbage and onions and garlic. All kinds of stuff, man. New Orleans, man. That Mardi Gras thing is really kind of a family kind of thing. Really.
Very much. And people will set up their sofas. They'll bring their sofa
out.
Onto Louisiana
and sit out and chill, and they be having their little drinks, and so some of them may be barbecue. I mean, all kinds of stuff be happening on the Mardi Gras during Mardi Gras season. I don't even think there's going to be no Mardi Gras this year.
Oh,
I don't think it's going to be a jazz fest this year because it's too dangerous, man.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah. One of the things that I really love about Mardi Gras is people will get these ladders. They're not step ladders, but they're like ladders that stand on their own, and they'll take a milk crate and cut half, the face of it out, so they can put their kids up on the ladder,
right,
and they can sit there and see the parade. And you see hundreds of these things,
Yeah, oh yeah,
yeah,
man,
yeah.
New Orleans, I mean, it's a beautiful thing, man. Mardi Gras is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so if all anybody's ever seen is a bunch of drunken people in Bourbon Street, they're missing the real Mardi Gras, the real.
Oh yeah. You got it. And then you got parades in all parts of the city.
Yeah.
That be happening. Like on the Mardi Gras day, they got an Irish channel. Well, where I came up, where they have what they call they start about like 6 o'clock in the morning, man.
Yeah.
It's a parade before the main parade, right? Before Rex and all that other stuff, right? You got that parade. And after Rex, then you got the truck parade that comes after Rex. The truck parade better than, well, I ain't gonna say it's better, but you can get more throws with the truck parade. Thousands of trucks, people, on trucks, beds of trucks throwing throws and whatnot, you know. So then you got the Mardi Gras Indians. The tribes meet up and, you know, all these that's in the inner part of the city. That's where you got to go inside the city to see that. You ain't going to see that on Bourbon Street. You got to go into the community, go into the neighborhoods where they tell you don't go to see that. Ain't nobody going to do you nothing. You know, but you know, it's dangerous. You got to not carry yourself, you know.
And there's no tourist guidebook. You have to find them.
Oh no,
because they're going to go where they're going to go.
But you got to be careful, you know. If you got to, you know, if you want to venture out, you got to venture out into the unforbidden path, man. Like we're going down to the Ninth Ward, man. They got Indians down there too. You know, the Black Eagles, they're down there.
I would say if you're in the area where there's a lot of people out and about, that's going to be fine. You just don't want to go to a neighborhood you don't know by yourself. That's probably not a good idea.
No, you don't. No,
that's not a good idea in any city. That's not a good idea in any city.
You don't be going off the not unless you with somebody who you know the neighborhood. You know. But
for instance, if you go to Super Sunday, there's that event I think it's called Super Sunday, where all the Indian tribes
come on the bayous. Yeah, it's on the bayou. You know, you can go down there. That's cool. You know, that's where all the Indians meet up on Super. Then they have a parade. You know, that's pretty cool. All the crowds of people. You know, but like you just go off into them neighborhoods, the little neighborhoods and stuff. You know, where people look a little different, you know, which they cool, you know, they just look a little different. They just look like something might happen to you, but they ain't necessarily that just people just look, you know, different neighborhoods, different people look a little different tribes, you know. That's like, remember these people here are descended from Africa, so there's a mixture of different tribes of people, and they all don't look the same, you know. You know, some of them might look. You might see one set of people. You might get afraid of. I think, but those people are because they look like that. Don't mean they're gonna do you nothing. You know, and it's depending on the neighborhood you live in. You know, the area you go in. You might go into a neighborhood, a very poor neighborhood, or you might go like why they got the projects. Of course, the projects look a lot different now than what they used to look like. But that don't mean something gonna happen to you, you know. Most people ain't trying to do you nothing. Listen, you know. But you know, that's in any city. Any city you go in, you gotta know how to. Especially, you know, I remember when I went to New York, man. That's the first time I actually seen crime in the street being committed.
New York. You know, funny thing about you're talking about pace of life too. After Katrina, I brought a band to upstate New York to tour a little bit called TBC, right? Those young guys.
TBC, yeah. I know TBC.
Yeah. So somebody I knew was making a film about them, and so I said, well, let's bring them and give them some work, you know. So we brought them to the city, and it was funny. They were young guys, you know, teenagers really, and they'd never been out of the South, and they just couldn't believe the pace of life in New York City.
Right.
They kept saying, we feel like we're in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first went to New York in 1971, man, or was it 71, 72? And we were staying at the Edison Hotel. No, we were staying at it wasn't Edison then. It was the other one. I can't think of the name of that doggone hotel. Right around the corner from Edison. Everybody used to stay. All the cast used to stay. But anyway, I was standing right in front of the hotel, and people was actually running into me. I said, man, what's all these people? Because I had never been in a big city where people were moving that fast. Everybody looked like they was running or jogging.
That's right.
What's going on? And you can get in a humbug, man. You can get in a fight quick in New York.
Oh yeah. You have to be careful.
You know, I got to tell you this story. It was quite funny. So we was playing at what was that, Madison Square Garden? I think it was. We was playing that. Yeah. So I caught a cab because I was running late. I caught a cab. So cab driver let me out on the other side of the street. I said, no, man, I'm going over here, man. Why you let me out? You know. So some kind of way he maneuvered and got on the other side of the street, which he should have brought me all the way to the back part of Madison. That's a big building, you know.
It's huge.
So, yeah, huge, man. So I still had to walk, look like about 3 blocks or so. You know, what happened was I paid him, then I gave him a tip. But I didn't have no more dollars. All I had was some change. So it was like about $2 and change, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave him the $2 and change, and he brought me back on the other side of the street and got out of his car. So now I can pay my goddamn rent and threw the money on the ground. I didn't know what was happening. I thought $2 was a good tip. You know?
Yeah, it's not bad.
I thought it was a good tip.
Yeah.
Man, he didn't. I couldn't get out because you can't get out the damn cab. So he threw the money and then it's okay. When I made the gig, so me and my friend of mine, we were walking out 7th Avenue, and we was across the street, and the cab tried to run over us. And the cab, I said, man, what's wrong with this? Then he got out, and he tried to run over us. Then he stopped the cab in the next block and got out the cab and went, come on, man, come on. I said, man, what's wrong with that dude, man? He said, man, that's that cab driver. He gave him $2 so you recognize it. He's trying to run over you.
Yeah, that's New York.
Well,
you won't have
about New York.
You won't have to worry about that kind of thing in New Orleans. Yeah, it's a different style of life.
Oh yeah,
New
Orleans ain't like that.
People have very nice manners in New Orleans. They have very.
Oh yeah,
nice
that's
manners.
the other thing. That's the other thing, because like you know, you've been here. People see you walk. They say, "How you doing?" You know, "Hello, how you doing?" In New York, you say, "How you doing?" They want to know why you talking to them.
Yeah.
Man, one night we was going down to Harlem to see a friend of mine that lived out in Harlem, you know. So we had, during that time, everybody used to wear the black leather jackets and the big apple hats, you know. So it was like about 2 o'clock in the morning. We were going down to Harlem to visit a friend. And it was raining, and there was a lady. She had a bag of groceries in her home, 2 bags of groceries in her home, and she slipped and she fell, and the groceries started going all over the place. So my instinct was to just automatically go to her head. And my partner said, man, no, don't do that, man. Leave her alone. No. Because when I went to help her, she was backing up like a spider, you know. She said, man, up here, man, you can't, you got to be careful, bro, because she said sometimes they could be running a scam on you. Or she probably, if she had a gun, she probably thought, but nobody don't help nobody. So you're trying to help her, she probably thought you were trying to do or something, and she had a gun, or not, she might have cut you or something. She said, if they follow you, just keep on. But they ain't like this around here in New Orleans, man. We don't roll like that.
Right. It's a very humane place, very family oriented.
People just walk right over you, man.
You know, unfortunately that's the truth. That is in New York. That is the truth. Hey, about music, who would you say when you were growing up, or as you developed as a musician, really inspired you the most? What kind of people really lit you up and made you think, "Wow, this is what I want to do"? Was there anybody in particular?
I credit all my musical stuff to my mother, and you know,
your mother. Okay.
Yeah, because my mother wanted me to play music. She wanted me to play piano in the church. Then my dad, you know, he bought me a saxophone because I wanted to play the saxophone. So before I even get in to talk about people that, you know, mentored me and whatnot like that, I got to give it to my parents, man. Because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. You know, they gave me and I made a living. I make a living out of playing music because of what my parents provided for me. They gave me an opportunity, because I'm living my dream, because this is all I wanted to do when I was a young kid coming up. I always wanted to play music and travel the world. I used to look at these encyclopedias. Everybody had encyclopedias in their house. I used to look at all these pictures of all these places in the world, man, you know. And one day I was in London, and I was looking at Big Ben out the window of the hotel. I was, you know, it was like I was in the book, you know. So my parents, I give it to my parents. I mean, of course, throughout the years, like Miss Stamps, Harold Baptiste, and people like Alvin Baptiste, Harold Baptiste, who was the musical director for Honey, what's the name of that? Cher.
Oh yeah, Sonny and Cher, yeah.
Sonny and Cher back in the day. He was one of my saxophone teachers.
Oh.
When I was in junior high school, then Alvin Baptiste was doing this practice and teaching, so he used to come over, and teach the kids. And Miss Stamps, who was over the music department, Mercy D. Stamps, which was a cousin of a friend of mine by the name of Frederick Kemp, who really taught me a whole lot of stuff about jazz, who really brought me around to hear jazz live. A very good friend of mine. My mother was actually my best friend, because he was responsible for getting me in the Fast Domino band. It was like whatever band I got in, I would pull it in with me. Now, there's a story about this guy. He was an alto player who's actually wound up playing tenor in Fast Domino band. A short guy, about maybe 5 feet. But this little guy, we used to play a club called Mary's Tavern uptown New Orleans on Magazine Street. We were little kids. I used to walk the ball, and he used to put sawdust on the floor so you could slide across the floor, playing your horn. Jump on, walk the ball, kick the drinks over so people, customers got to buy more drinks. And we was playing. We were little kids, man. We had to be about, we were about 13 years old playing these ballrooms, 13,
wow.
14 years old, yeah. So.
And playing R&B stuff?
Yeah, we were playing R&B with jazz too, what we call jazz. We thought we were playing jazz. These little popular jazz tunes that was out, Boo diddle dip. Boo diddle dip. Ba 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 da da ba da 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 ba ba da ba ba da da do 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 ba do do ba do do. Pow pow, you was swinging out, playing stuff, little popular things that was happening at the time, making up stuff, which is what jazz is all about, improvisation, So anyway, so I had to walk the ball, slip across the floor, ran out the front door, came through the back, to the side door, slip across the floor, do my little thing, we kids having fun. And all of a sudden, this dude's he's playing alto and staying in position, did a backwards flip while playing his horn.
What?
In standing position by playing it. By playing it, propelled it back and landed in the same spot.
Oh my God!
Boy, then people came up and started throwing money, and so we. Long story short, at the end of the day, we gathered all the little money up. So we go down the street from the dude right there, had a little sweet shop, and we in the corner of the little sweet shop. We got the money on the floor. We counting the money. So we come up with $47 and some change. Wow. That was back in 1950. Somewhere around up in there.
That's rent. That's rent.
And people, if you was making $100 a week on a day job, you was rich.
Yeah.
So, I had a job. I was making about $47 a week. I come home with that money. My mama said, "Boy, where you get all that money from?" I said, "I was playing with Kemp, and Kemp started doing backwards flips, and people started throwing money at us." Yeah, man. So, like that other thing about New Orleans, you can play in clubs, at an early age, you don't have to be 21. Well, you're supposed to be at least 21 or 18. I was playing on Bourbon Street, and I was 15, 16 years old, man. 17 years old,
That raises an interesting thing, and you mentioned New Orleans is really a family-oriented city, but it's also a children-oriented place in the sense that a lot of investment is made by people in the children.
See, the Parkway Commission, not because the Parkway Commission is responsible. This guy by we call him Sun Pie. His name is Bruce. I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Sun
I know
Pie.
him.
He's a Zydeco. he worked for the Parkway Commission, and he could develop a program for young people. Matter of fact, Benny Jones and the Tremere Brass Band was a part of that, to give them the opportunity for young people who's trying to get into music to come actually play with a band, you know. And a lot of young guys came out of that band, and playing on really playing on a high level. So you got like the Parkway Commission, things like that help develop young people. The Ellis Marcellus Center, you know, stuff like that.
One of the other many things that makes New Orleans unique is how much the communities invest in young people. I think it's more than other places, frankly. I don't see many places that do as much for their young people.
Well, you know, it used to be better, I think, for music, coming from as far as music is concerned. I'm speaking of my generation. Well, not only music, but other things too other than that. Because in my generation, not only just about all the schools had bands, you know, with uniforms. Just about every school had a band, had music. We had so much music. We even had, you know, World House of Music. We had a complete music. We don't have no music stores here. No instrument.
Wow.
You know, no. You know, we had World House of Music, Room Walls for Music, Campos for Music. You don't have none of that, man. It turned into World House for Music, which was a complete music store. You can bring your instrument and they get it overhauled, replayed it, or whatever. I mean, it's, you know, they don't have that. They turn that place into a restaurant. See, all the music they got in the city, you can't even go buy an instrument nowhere. You got to sign off for one, you know.
Wow.
We don't have that many. I think we only got 2 saxophone repairmen here in this city.
Really?
You know, so, yeah. I mean, yeah, man. That's the way it is, you know. So with my generation, you had people was more productive that came out of junior high and senior high school, because, you know, everybody ain't going to college, that kind of thing. So in the school system, because how they had the school system, it was designed where you had homemaking, shop, carpentry, roofing, plumbing, you know, everything that you need to, you know, to go get a job. You could come out of junior high school and have a trade. It was like schools were like trade schools. So even a music program, everything was so hip, super hip, you know. But as time went on, they took all these programs out the public school system, you know. They thought for whatever reason they did that, you know, which I didn't think made any sense. So like now kids don't, you know, the average kid don't even know how to use a hammer or a nail, man.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have, you know, they don't have a trade. There's nothing they can do. It's kind of left in limbo, you know. They don't know how to do nothing.
And New Orleans was famous for building trade. There were so many
Exactly.
World class.
Man, you had everything, man. Roofing. I got to do all kinds of stuff. I chose not to do it.
The guys that did tin work and the guys that did the iron work.
Oh, man. Leather craftsman, homemaking, teaching you how to cook, sewing, drafting. I was supposed to be an architect. I was taking drafting in high school. You know, yeah, all kinds of stuff, man. You know, but
and the quality of the music education was to make you into a professional, so that when you got out of high school, you were a professional.
Teach you how to read music, teaching you how to read music. So, because, you know, you can make a living with not read music, but you want to be able to read music, because you can't read, then you miss that gig, you know.
Right.
You know, so.
And then you had all these well-trained New Orleans musicians that were able to go all over the
best of the
country.
Best, man. You had the best of the best. The music teachers here was no joke, man. You had the best. And you still got pretty good music teachers here too, also. Like that school NOCA. Noka, man, where Wynton Marsalis and Bradford and all them cats came out, man, everybody come out there and play. Them cats play on a higher level, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, but they had schools, you know, they had like high schools that was just as good that you could, you know, learn how to play. A lot of guys didn't go to Noka. A lot of them came from even Miss Yvonne Bush. He was teaching you everything that you need to know.
Let's go back to her for a second because she did train so many people. I believe she trained James Black and
Smokey Robinson, Smokey Robinson, Porky Jones. What's this other drummer name? John Boudreaux.
Herlin.
Man, everybody.
Herlin too, right?
Yeah, I think I think Herlin had a little taste of her too. Yeah, she taught it. I mean, everybody, man. You know.
So what was now? I know you guys had a problem because you were too advanced, but how was her teaching? What was it like? What was her style? What was her
no nonsense? Number one.
Okay.
No nonsense. Strict. Very, very, very strict. She was. I'm sorry she put me out the band. I mean, because really and truly, when I thought about it, here's a woman trying to teach. She's a teacher. She's trying to teach you how to read music and theory and stuff like that. Here come this dude coming there and playing out in the streets, coming in there with his thing, coming there disrupting the class. Talking about let's play, let's swing. And she trying to teach you little kids the fundamentals. You know I come with my
Roger, did you know that Ornette got thrown out of his high school band too?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, he did for the same reason. For the same reason, he was playing. I think he was playing bebop, and the guy just threw him right out.
Yeah, but you know, I thought that. In my mind, I thought she should have embraced it myself. You know, I mean, what's wrong? I didn't feel that I was doing nothing wrong. You know.
Yeah.
Because eventually they were going to have to do that anyway.
Right.
You know, but then I understood. You know, I understood where it was, where it was, you know, what would actually happen. You know, I could understand why she did that. You know.
So she basically, you know, had very high standards, was very strict, was very professional. The kids were expected to be professional.
Very, 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 very professional, man. Miss Bush was no nonsense, man.
Okay.
You know, I learned a lot from her. Matter of fact, you know, I was pretty good when I was, you know, in music when I was going there. You know, I was, you know, I guess I was, you know, maybe just a little bit above the average, maybe. You know, in my mind anyway. But then I was playing tennis, so they put me on bassoon and concert band, which is a very, very difficult instrument to deal with, man. All them little buttons and things back there, man. I was playing that, man, a double reed. You know, we had put me on bassoon. I guess I was getting it together for concert band, but that didn't happen. I got Canyon. Coming in there trying to be hip.
And then there were marching bands, and there was all kinds of opportunities for kids to play all the time. It wasn't just band class.
Oh no, you had marching band because you had football. You know, and then you had big band, you had competition. You know, they had like what they call that. Once a year, you had the bands. The bands would compete for superior plus, that kind of thing. Then you had individual things that where individual musicians like this would participate in, you know, like competition, like in saxophone. You might get a superior plus, somebody else might get something else, you know, but you was competing on your skills. It was mostly classical music, so that's what it was. It wasn't like blues or nothing like that, because if they were playing the blues, I'd have won every time. But it was It was reading music, classical, mostly classical. They taught you classical music because classical music helped you develop your technique and reading. I'm not saying that bebop don't do that other than because if you got the Omni book, man, that's a hell of a book to read, with them Charlie Parker solos in there, But I'm just saying, I'm not saying that classical music was, but that's what they was teaching, and that's what they was teaching, Bach and Beethoven, Handel, and all that kind of stuff, And
was there any singing instruction or? I know
yes,
that,
yes, sir.
Yeah. Tell me about that, because I learned from somebody that apparently that Louis Armstrong, in public school, before he even had a horn, they taught solfege. That do re mi, where you have to be able to identify.
Yeah. When I was in Miss Sheffield, that was my kindergarten teacher. We had band, we had music. We used to have little percussion instruments. Had a little choir. A little choir. She teaching little kids how to sing and all that kind of stuff, man. Yeah. Yes,
started early.
Yes,
wow.
Yeah. Even in elementary school, man, we had music. They was teaching us rhythm because we had the little wooden blocks and the little bells and stuff like that, and it was singing. Had singing classes. They would in part that was part of your upbringing, So we had music even in elementary school. They had music in New Orleans. Yes, indeed. And
then of course you'd have singing in church too.
Yeah, definitely in a choir. And, like I say, but like my mother, when her thing was. She said, I'm going to send him the piano lesson. Piano lesson was 50 cents a lesson. I used to walk about 3 miles, 3 or 4 miles. The piano lesson was on a Saturday, 50 cents for an hour. And it was Miss Handy. That's what the lady named, Miss Handy. Matter of fact, the house is still there.
Wow.
Right there on Louisiana Avenue in Dania, right next door to Holy Ghost Church. House is still right there. Yeah, I used to go in that little house, a little shotgun house, take them piano lessons. And we didn't have a piano at my house, so I used to go to the neighbor next door and practice on their piano because one of the little girls that stayed there, she played piano. She was really good. She was, she could read. She was a good little piano player, Used to go over there and practice on their piano. Used to let me come over there and practice on their piano. Neighbors, you're one of the neighbors, The people's like that,
Cooperation.
See, if you're trying to do something positive, people will help you. You're trying to do something. People see you trying to make something out yourself. They will definitely help you. They will definitely help you, man. And then back then, in that generation, like we were saying about how people were, you see somebody, you say good morning, good evening, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes ma'am, yes sir, And the way people used to dress, of course, that's a different time, Everybody would dress, you wouldn't see nobody with their pants underneath their behind and their underwear showing.
Yeah. When you see the old pictures, everybody's definitely dressing up.
Well, then in New Orleans it's like a style show because we had all of these jelly shops up and down Rampart Street. Harry Hyman, National Tailors, everybody wore tailor-made clothes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, man, coming up.
Interesting.
Man, you be on the gig, you be clean as a bowl of hell. Everybody be trying to outdress everybody. Everybody wore suits and ties and hats. And you got on a suit and you ain't got no hat. You ain't got your crown on your head. This hat is your crown. You ain't got no crown, man. You're not really fully dressed.
Okay.
But even in school, you have to wear a tie. You have to
Wow,
wear a tie.
in public school. In public school.
Public school, yeah, you have a tie.
How do you
on,
like that?
Especially when you got to high school. You know, everybody had to wear a tie. You had to be neat. You know, cats used to wear khaki pants. Used to get that all-go starch and mix it with water and spray that starch on them pants, and man, the doggone crease used to be like a razor. You go get you some Howard and Fosters or some Stacey Adams, old folks comforts, and everybody should shine their shoes. You know, you step on somebody's shoes, might start a fight. And that spit shine, you'd be like military, like, you know. But that's the way it was coming up, you know. And everybody was polite. And then the other thing is, if you get in a fight, I used to have to fight damn near every day when I was going to elementary school, but that's just the way it was. But you get in a fight with somebody, you know, ain't nobody going home and getting a Uzi and come back and Uzi the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, people didn't do that. People, you get in a fight with somebody, you get your butt beat. Let's sit down there, have a drink, have a beer, man. Why not be your best friend? You got me today, I might get you tomorrow, man, you know. It don't be all of that, I'm going to kill you. People was more civilized, man, and, you know. It wasn't all that bullshit, you know.
One thing historically, you know, that I realized that you probably experienced, which is Claiborne Avenue before they put the interstate.
Yeah, it was a beautiful street. Claiborne Avenue was like the bourgeoisie of the 6th Ward, 7th Ward. You know,
okay.
It was a beautiful street. It had the palm trees and all that kind of stuff, you know. It was like, before they come through there with that doggone interstate, messed everything up. That was a beautiful community, man. Black community.
Yeah,
so
for people that don't know, there's an interstate running right through New Orleans now, Interstate 10, I think it is. And
yeah.
You know, kind of when you see something like that, you think, well, it's always been here, and maybe they just built it over nothing. But then I learned later, no, they built it over one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in the city.
That's right. And then Claiborne Street is you can go. It runs down the center of New Orleans, from the 9th Ward all the way up to pretty much to the airport. You know, because Claiborne Street turns to Jefferson Parish.
Okay.
It's the center. It's like the center of New Orleans. You know, that street is. You know.
So were there a lot of music venues in that neighborhood, on that street, on Claiborne?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of that, you had Joan L's, you had the Off Limits. So that was a club that would kick off about 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning.
Wow.
And you come out of there, be like 6 weeks, and you come out of that club and go straight to church. The sun be shining, man. Yeah, it was. And then you had the Bon Ton, which was on another club down in that area. That was a nightclub. Then you had the Hi-Hat Club and the Velvet Street Lounge. Now the Velvet Street Lounge was attached to the Hi-Hat Club. It was a club that was run or owned by a guy by the name of Tommy Risley, and the Untouchables was a blues singer. But the Velvet Street Lounge was the jazz club. You couldn't see the band, you could hear the band. The band would be playing in what I used to call a pigeonhole. We just had enough space up in there for some drums and a piano and a saxophone player and the trumpet. It was like a little tight space, man. I mean, unbelievable. So I don't know how they got that piano up there, but anyway, you had to go up some stairs. You couldn't see the band. Band be playing there, so you'd be downstairs in a little small club. Then you had the Autocrat Club. That was like bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie club. If you didn't match that paper bag, you wasn't getting in that club.
Okay.
You talking in a paper bag. You know, we had segregation among black folks too. You know, with the lights some of the light-skinned people, then, it was, every race got that, though, You got the Italians, and you got the, the Jewish people, and you got, whatever. But anyway, yeah, around Claiborne Street, man, you had all these, then you had the singer, you had where they used to put on dances and whatnot. So it was a lot of activity. It was like, that was like a strip, too, at Claiborne, man, if you was on, running out of Claiborne, you was in a good, that's the heart of the Sixth Ward, where all the brass bands come. Where all the brass bands
is also it's the Treme. When people hear Treme, that's Sixth Ward.
Yeah, that's where all the brass bands pretty much came out of.
Well, there's another point I guess we should make, because now when people go to hear music, they're just sitting there watching, but I'm guessing most of these places, they were all about dancing.
Oh, yeah, it was always about dancing, man. It was always about dancing. I mean, that's what, New Orleans music is dancing. I mean, now we got music for your mind, body, and your soul. Now we got music that make you sit down and think about what's going on. You want to be there, you want to look at it from that point of view, intellectually, you want to sit down and dissect the music. Yeah, we got music, we got, like I said, we got music for your mind, body, and soul. Whatever your taste is, we got it for you.
That's the truth. That's the truth. If you want, very traditional music, you can find some of that. If you want, Cajun or Zydeco, or avant-garde jazz. I've heard some really great avant-garde stuff in New Orleans too.
Not to be taken for granted.
Yeah.
The music of New Orleans is not to be taken for granted. Man. You got everything right here.
There you go. And so I want to encourage you.
And you can make a living doing it.
Right. Right. It's one of the few places you can really do that these days, playing live music. So I want to encourage everybody listening, if you've never been to New Orleans and you love music, you really must make a plan to get there and start exploring this. And Roger's given you some good tips on how to move when you're down there. Give yourself time. Don't hang out in Bourbon Street. You're not going to have too much there.
Well, they don't even have the clubs that they used to have in Bourbon Street. See, during my time, there was nothing but music, man, up and down Bourbon Street. Nothing but music. Period. Now you got T-shirt shops and all this other stuff. You might have about maybe 2 or 3 clubs, maybe, But back during my generation, man, there was music all over Bourbon Street, man. It's about in every block.
Now pretty much the only block of solid block of music, I guess, is Frenchman. They'll have a whole bunch of clubs on. Yeah. And then there's clubs in different places, was it Lamplighter? Is that what it's called? That's in the Sixth Ward, right?
You're talking
it's like
Candlelight.
Candlelight.
Candlelight is the only place where you can hear traditional New Orleans music.
And
Candlelight, the only place where you can. They got another club called, but they don't do traditional music. They do rhythm and blues. What's the name of that club, Bob? Seal. I used to be anybody's place back in my generation. That's like on Saint Bernard and Galvez, Saint Bernard and Miro.
Yeah. Well, then there's the Palm Court. They're still in business, right?
Palm Court. That's like in the it's part of the French Quarter. Palm Court. They got Preservation. Then you got Snug Harbor, which is a jazz club.
Yeah.
I used to play there every Wednesday on Frenchman. Then you got right across from there, you got the Spotted Cat.
Yeah.
Which Benny Jones really started. Probably the first band to play there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, the Treme Brass Band. Mm-hmm. Benny Jones was responsible for a lot of these people having music in their clubs, man, around here. He introduced music to a lot. Yeah, like the Candlelight and the Spotted Cat. And he plays at he plays at the DBA. You know, first band to play at the DBA.
No kidding. So he got a lot of things. He got a lot of things started then.
Yeah, man, he's a cat that got a lot of stuff happening. He's responsible for a lot of young musicians playing music. Playing, everybody will come through Benny Jones one time or another, playing traditional music. Yeah.
And
he gave all the kids an opportunity to play, or anybody, really.
And he's a drummer.
Great guy. Drummer, yeah, great. He's the best drummer in the world, but he's an organizer. I call him an organizer.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of them kind of cats, you know.
Yeah.
One of them kind of cats. See, back in the day when the Dirty Dozen was getting started, what was so really got us really out there, because Benny Jones was friends with everybody in the social and pleasure clubs. And, you know, Benny Jones was responsible for a lot of stuff, man. A lot of musical. He probably got every award the city has to offer for his music, you know. You know, very well respected, organized, you know.
Hey, Roger, I'm looking at the clock here, and I think it's time
we've been
for
talking
lunch.
a while now. Well, my wife says, "You still doing the interview?" I say, "Yeah." She said, "It's been over an hour and something." I said,
For sure.
You haven't been talking that long. You know, I get to talking, man, you know.
Yeah, but this has been great. This is just what I hoped it would be. I wanted people to hear, you know, what they say straight from the horse's mouth, you know, and, you know, what is New Orleans? Why is it so special? And here's a man that lives it and knows.
No place like New Orleans in the world, man. I mean, people come here from all over the world, man, just to experience this you know, I remember that a guy came here, all he wanted to do was learn the little licks that would be played in brass band. I said, that's all you want. He was a good saxophone player, too. Well, you couldn't get the rhythm, man. You know, I spent hours and hours with this man trying to, he said, no, show me how you say that go. He said, did. I said, no, did. And we couldn't get it, couldn't feel that. You know, so people come here, man, you know, and getting back to the Dirty Dozen, I'm going to say this. Dirty Dozen was responsible. We didn't have all them brass bands before Dirty Dozen came on the scene. I'm talking about all over the world.
All over the world, right. This is a worldwide movement, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have all them brass bands, man. And then tuba players wasn't making no living playing no tuba. So Curry Joseph and tuba Fats came on the scene. That's
wow,
right.
Really? Interesting.
That's right.
Interesting.
The cats revolutionized that kind of tuba playing, man. You know, that's right. That's a fact.
So now there's brass bands.
I remember Howard Johnson and Bob Stewart. He was playing Den Haag Holland, man, and he came to Curry Rum and put me out. They wanted to know how you do that, how you breathe like that. You know, they was picking his brain because his style, it didn't sound like somebody playing a tuba. Mm-hmm. It sounded like somebody playing an electric bass or upright bass, because it didn't sound like, you know, like most tuba do bop and bop. None of that bop pop stuff, you know.
Yeah.
He had a different approach. The tuba fast was Anthony Lacey. He really was the master. He was probably the two most famous tuba players that ever came out of New Orleans. Curry Joseph and tuba Fats, Anthony Lacey. But there's another tuba player by the name of Julius McKee. Mm-hmm. He was extraordinary tuba player too. He also played with the Dirty Dozen. But these guys, man, they took that thing to a whole nother level, man. you know.
And so now all over the world, even I live in the upstate in New York. It's sort of the countryside, and there's even 2 brass bands up here.
Oh, you talking about there's a guy by the name of Dave. What's Dave's last name, man? He got a brass band. Matter of fact, I just did a little video. Matter of fact, I put the video together for him. Yeah, they're popping up all over the place, man.
They even started a brass music festival up here.
Yeah. Man.
And this is cow country up here. I mean, this is the mountains, and you know, but it's all over the world. It's all over the world. So and that flows from the Dirty Dozen Brass Band straight out of New Orleans. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing.
Straight out of New Orleans, man. It's straight out of New Orleans. That's a fact.
Yeah.
No brag, but just a fact. I don't believe in bragging, but I mean it's a fact. I'm just speaking of what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So thank goodness for our musicians, and thank goodness for New Orleans. And again, I want to encourage you. I guess I make a point of this because believe it or not, I didn't get to New Orleans till I was 40 years old, and I was a music fan. I just, I grew up in New York City, so I thought I knew everything, and then I went after Katrina to help out, and then I'm like, oh my God, this is like this is like paradise for music.
Yeah, it's a whole nother place on the planet.
Yeah, it's I finally got myself to Cuba a couple of years ago, and Havana's amazing.
I've been trying to get over there. Been trying to get to Cuba, man.
Well, if you ever need pointers, I've got great connections there. Great, I mean the best in the music world. I want
to go to Cuba so bad, man.
Yeah.
Check out the music. There are great musicians down in Cuba, man.
Woo. They really, really do.
Them dudes ain't, they ain't faking at all.
No, and it's it's very similar to New Orleans in that they have a really strong education system for young people. All the young people learn their classical music really well, but then there's the party music, the fun music, and everybody learns that. And a lot of respect for the older musicians. Everybody's learning from everybody else. It's a community. It's not like a segregated, well, these guys are young, these guys are old. It's none of that at all. Everybody's together, all learning and appreciating the music. Well, it literally, if any time you're itching to go and you need guidance or connections, I have very, very, very solid connections musically in Cuba now.
I'll make it a point to contact you.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. And they'd love you. They would embrace you because they love music. It's just like New Orleans. They love music. The same kind of friendliness, the same kind of community support, same kind of nice manners, and they can play. Yeah, they can definitely play.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, the guy here on Chicken-Wawa. He goes down to Cuba all the time, and he asked me, he said, man, you got any reeds, man? Because reeds are hard to get, So I had an endorsement. With a reed company. So I just gave them about 5 or 6 boxes of reeds to bring down there, for the folks, I know this is kind of hard to get stuff,
It's unbelievable. You can't believe it until you're down there. Like I tried to buy index cards, because a friend of mine was preparing down there to take an exam. I said, well, let's make you some index cards, and you can make some flashcards. And we couldn't find index cards for her in the whole city of Havana, 2 million people.
Damn.
Like so many basic things that we take for granted they don't have. So believe those reeds are a treasure that you sent down there.
Oh yeah, man. I sent about 3 or 4 boxes, I think it was.
Oh wow. Well,
I was getting them, So I said, what the heck, I don't, try to help somebody else out, That's what it's all about,
Yeah. I have a good connection with the guy that runs the Havana Jazz Festival. Now the problem is they don't pay.
Yeah, that's the only thing. You see, I mean, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but this is a business too,
Exactly.
I mean, we love to play music, but we like to get paid too.
No, exactly.
I'm a professional musician. I do this stuff for a living, you know. But I do a lot of, stuff for free too, you know. But at the end of the day, you gotta, everybody's trying to eat, man.
No, exactly. So you got to work something out with somebody to bring you down there. And I went. This guy, I don't know if you ever heard of David Amram. Does that ring a bell? He's a New York guy, David Amram. Yeah, he's been around forever. He just turned 90. He played a little bit with Mingus. He played French horn with Mingus way back in the early era. Anyway, I went down. I brought him down to Havana Jazz Festival, and so that he could be part of it, and then have fun with it, because it's you know what, I think it's maybe the best music festival I've ever been to. I mean, it's crazy, the things going on down there when it's really spectacular. But anyway, Roger, it's been a great pleasure to meet you. I want to thank you for giving us your time and sharing these memories with us.
Man. I really did. It's one of the best interviews I have done. It's so relaxed and so really cool, you know.
Okay. Well, thank you, and I'll send my contact information to your manager. He's got it, but I'll just send it to him again.
Good.
And seriously, if something ever brings you to Cuba and you want some pointers or people that you could go and meet who'd receive you warmly, I can definitely handle that.
I appreciate that, man. I really do.
Okay.
Keep that in mind. Okay. Remember, don't let that corona get on you.
Thank you.
Tell him get back. Get back. All right. Take care, man.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, please share it. That's how we grow. And remember to subscribe to JazzOnTheTube.com, the Internet's largest collection of free, streamable, classic jazz videos.